Welcome to True.
Giants of the Ice, The Woolly Mammoth Story. Introduction. Narrator. 20,000 years ago, the world was a vastly different place. Massive ice sheets, some more than 2 miles thick, blanketed much of the northern hemisphere. The climate was harsh, unforgiving, and brutally cold. Yet across these frozen realms, from the windswept plains of Siberia to the tundra grasslands of North America, from the shores of what is now Britain to the edges of the Bering Land Bridge, an extraordinary giant ruled supreme. This was the age of the woolly mammoth, Mammuthus primigenius, one of the most magnificent creatures ever to walk the earth. These colossal herbivores were not mere animals. They were living fortresses of fur and muscle, perfectly engineered by millions of years of evolution to thrive in conditions that would kill most modern mammals within hours. The woolly mammoth's story spans approximately 300,000 years of Earth's history, from the depths of the Pleistocene epoch through multiple glacial cycles, surviving when countless other species perished. They witnessed the rise and fall of ice ages, the emergence of modern humans, and the slow, inexorable transformation of their world. At their peak, mammoths ranged across an enormous territory, virtually all of northern Eurasia and throughout much of North America, forming what was likely one of the most successful large mammal populations in the planet's history. Standing before a woolly mammoth, one would have been immediately struck by 3 defining characteristics. First, the dense, shaggy coat of reddish-brown to dark brown hair, hanging in curtains that could reach nearly to the ground, layered over thick underfur that trapped warmth against the skin. Second, the magnificent curved tusks, sweeping outward and upward in elegant spirals that could exceed 13 feet in length, tools of survival carved from ivory. Third, the distinctive humped back, sloping downward from a pronounced shoulder hump to a lower hip, giving these giants a profile unlike any creature alive today. But the woolly mammoth was more than just its iconic appearance. It was a keystone species, an ecosystem engineer whose very existence shaped the landscape around it. Where mammoths roamed, they maintained the vast grasslands, preventing the encroachment of forests, creating pathways that other animals followed, and recycling nutrients back into the soil with their prodigious digestive systems. They were living monuments to the power of adaptation, proof that life could flourish even in Earth's most extreme environments. This is their story, a tale of survival and extinction, of predator and prey, of ice and fire. It is a story that ended only 4,000 years ago, when the last mammoth drew its final breath on a remote Arctic island, while on the other side of the world, the pyramids of Egypt were already ancient. Join us as we journey back through the mists of time to walk beside these magnificent beasts, to understand how they lived, how they fought to survive, and ultimately, why they vanished from the face of the earth. 2. Anatomy and adaptations. Narrator. To truly appreciate the woolly mammoth, one must understand the remarkable biological engineering that allowed it to conquer the Ice Age world. The architecture of a giant. An adult woolly mammoth was a creature of staggering dimensions. Males, the larger of the sexes, typically stood between 9 and 11 feet tall at the shoulder, roughly equivalent to a modern African elephant, though some populations were considerably smaller or larger, depending on their geographic location. Despite similar heights, mammoths were often somewhat stockier than their modern cousins, with males weighing between 6 and 8 tons at full maturity. Females were generally smaller, standing 8 to 9 feet tall and weighing 4 to 6 tons. However, these were not the largest mammoths to ever exist. That distinction belongs to the earlier Columbian mammoth, which stood up to 13 feet tall. The woolly mammoth had actually evolved to be somewhat smaller, a common adaptation in cold climates where a more compact body conserves heat more efficiently. The most immediately striking feature was, without question, the coat. Woolly mammoths weren't merely hairy, they were mobile fortresses of insulation. The outer guard hairs could reach lengths of up to 3 feet, forming a shaggy curtain that hung like a protective cloak around the animal's body. These coarse outer hairs were not just for show. They deflected wind, shed water and snow, and created air pockets that trapped heat. Beneath this outer layer lay a second coat of dense, fine underfur, some of the thickest and most effective insulation found in any mammal, living or extinct. This underfur, measuring up to 8 inches in thickness, created a thermal barrier so effective that mammoths could maintain their core body temperature even when the ambient air plunged to 40 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit or colder. But fur alone was not enough. Beneath the skin, mammoths possessed a layer of subcutaneous fat up to 4 inches thick, providing both additional insulation and energy reserves during the long Arctic winters when food was scarce. This fat layer had a special composition, remaining pliable even at low temperatures, unlike the fats of many animals, which become rigid in extreme cold. The combination of fur and fat meant that a woolly mammoth was effectively wearing a biological Arctic survival suit at all times. Tools of survival. The tusks of a woolly mammoth were far more than ornamental weapons. These remarkable structures were actually highly modified incisor teeth that grew continuously throughout the animal's life. In bulls, tusks could exceed 13 feet in length and weigh up to 100 pounds each, though most were somewhat smaller. Female tusks were typically thinner and shorter. What made mammoth tusks distinctive was their pronounced curvature. They swept outward from the face, then curved upward and inward, sometimes even crossing at the tips in older males. These magnificent implements served multiple crucial functions. During winter months, mammoths used their tusks as snow shovels, sweeping away the frozen blanket to expose the vegetation beneath. The curved shape was ideal for this task, allowing the mammoth to clear large areas with efficient side-to-side movements. Tusks also served as digging tools for excavating frozen soil to reach roots and tubers, as weapons for defense against predators, and as status symbols and sparring equipment during the breeding season when males competed for the attention of females. The ivory surface of mammoth tusks showed growth rings, much like tree rings, which modern scientists can study to determine the animal's age, health history, and even seasonal migration patterns. The trunk was perhaps the mammoth's most versatile tool. This muscular appendage, containing an estimated 40,000 individual muscles but no bones, could perform feats of both incredible strength and remarkable delicacy. A mammoth could use its trunk to uproot small trees, yet handle objects as small as a single blade of grass. The trunk served as a combination of nose, hand, and snorkel. It could reach high into trees to pull down branches, or probe beneath snow for buried vegetation. The two finger-like projections at the trunk's tip, an upper and lower lip, provided precision grip for grasping specific items. The trunk was also vital for social interaction, used to caress calves, greet other herd members, and even comfort individuals in distress. Specialized feeding apparatus. Perhaps no feature better illustrates the mammoth's adaptation to its environment than its remarkable teeth. Mammoths possessed a unique dental system perfectly engineered for their harsh dietary needs. Unlike humans, who have all their teeth present simultaneously, mammoths had a conveyor belt tooth replacement system similar to modern elephants. They had 6 sets of molars over their lifetime, with new teeth developing at the back of the jaw and slowly moving forward as the older teeth in front wore down and fell out. Each molar was a masterpiece of biological engineering, enormous, sometimes weighing 9 pounds or more, with a surface that looked like a washboard, composed of parallel enamel ridges. These ridges were ideal for grinding the tough, abrasive vegetation that formed the mammoth's diet. The enamel plates were particularly high and closely spaced in woolly mammoths, more so than in other mammoth species, allowing them to process the gritty, silica-rich grasses of the mammoth steppe. When a mammoth chewed, these ridges acted like multiple grinding surfaces working in parallel, maximizing the efficiency of food processing. This dental system had one critical limitation: it was not renewable indefinitely. Once a mammoth wore through its 6th and final set of molars, usually around 60 years of age, it could no longer chew properly. Unable to extract sufficient nutrition from food, the animal would gradually weaken and eventually starve, death by dental failure, a fate that befell many elderly mammoths and made them vulnerable to predators in their declining years. Cold climate engineering. Every aspect of mammoth anatomy reflected optimization for cold survival. Their ears were remarkably small compared to modern elephants, only about a foot long versus the 6-foot ears of an African elephant. This dramatic reduction in ear size was a crucial adaptation. Large ears would lose tremendous amounts of body heat and be susceptible to frostbite. The mammoth's small, furry ears sacrificed some hearing acuity and heat dissipation ability, but in a world of perpetual cold, conserving heat was far more important than cooling down. Even the mammoth's tail was adapted for the cold, shorter and more densely furred than elephant tails, better at retaining warmth and less likely to become frostbitten. The tail was primarily used for communication and to swat away the few hardy insects that plagued mammoths during brief summer months, but it was not an evolutionary priority in a frozen world. Internal adaptations matched external ones. Mammoths had a special cold-adapted form of hemoglobin, the protein in blood that carries oxygen. This unique hemoglobin continued to function efficiently at low body temperatures, ensuring that even the extremities, feet, ears, trunk tip received adequate oxygen even when cooled by contact with frozen ground or frigid air. This adaptation has been confirmed by genetic analysis of mammoth DNA recovered from frozen specimens. Diet and digestive prowess. Woolly mammoths were bulk feeders, consuming between 300 and 400 pounds of vegetation daily, roughly equivalent to eating 16 to 20% of their body weight every day. This massive intake was necessary because their diet consisted primarily of low-nutrition, high-fiber plants, grasses, sedges, herbs, and woody shrubs. During warmer months, they supplemented this diet with flowers, forbs, and whatever greenery they could find. In winter, they subsisted on dried grasses, bark, twigs, and whatever they could excavate from beneath the snow. The mammoth's digestive system was remarkably efficient at extracting nutrients from this marginal diet. Like modern elephants, they had a simple stomach, but a very long intestinal tract, estimated at over 100 feet in length, which allowed for extended fermentation of plant material. However, their digestive efficiency was still only about 40 to 50%, meaning that more than half of what they ate passed through their system undigested. This inefficiency actually played an important ecological role, as mammoth dung helped fertilize and spread seeds across the landscape. Social architecture. Evidence from multiple sources, including frozen remains with preserved soft tissues, tracks fossilized in ancient mud, and behavior of modern elephants, strongly suggests that woolly mammoths lived in matriarchal herds. These groups typically consisted of related females and their offspring, led by the oldest and most experienced female. Adult bulls generally lived solitary lives or formed small bachelor groups, joining female herds only during the breeding season. The advantages of herd living were numerous: protection from predators, shared knowledge of migration routes and food sources, collective care of young, and cooperative behavior during environmental challenges. The matriarchs accumulated wisdom, knowing where to find water during droughts, which migration routes were safest, how to respond to predators, was invaluable for herd survival. When a matriarch died, her absence could have devastating consequences for the entire group. 3. Life cycle and behavior. Narrator. The life of a woolly mammoth began in vulnerability and, if fortune smiled, ended only after more than 6 decades of survival in one of Earth's harshest environments. The miracle of birth. Mammoth reproduction followed a pattern similar to modern elephants, with females reaching sexual maturity around age 10 to 12, and males somewhat later, around 15. The estrus cycle occurred annually, with females receptive to mating for only a few days each year. When a female came into estrus, she would release pheromones that could be detected by males across vast distances. Bulls would travel from far away, drawn by the chemical signals, and compete for the opportunity to mate. Competition between males was intense. Bulls would engage in ritualized battles, pushing against each other with locked tusks, attempting to demonstrate superior strength. These contests rarely resulted in serious injury. The weaker male would typically withdraw before either combatant was hurt, but they did establish dominance hierarchies that determined breeding rights. The largest, strongest, most experienced bulls won the most mating opportunities, ensuring that their superior genes would be passed to the next generation. After successful mating, a female faced a pregnancy lasting approximately 22 months, nearly 2 years of gestation, one of the longest pregnancy periods of any mammal. This extended development time was necessary to produce a calf large, and developed enough to survive the harsh Ice Age environment. When the time came to give birth, usually in late spring or early summer when conditions were most favorable, the pregnant female would be surrounded and supported by other females in the herd. Birth itself was a moment of extreme vulnerability. A newborn mammoth calf weighed approximately 200 pounds and stood roughly 3 feet tall, sizable by most standards, but tiny compared to the towering adults that surrounded it. The calf emerged covered in reddish-brown natal fur, significantly softer and lighter than adult pelage. Within minutes of birth, the calf would struggle to its feet on wobbly legs, driven by instinct to stand and nurse as quickly as possible. Those first hours were critical. A calf that could not stand and nurse rapidly would not survive. The vulnerable years. A mammoth calf's early life was defined by maternal devotion and herd protection. For the first several years, the calf would remain constantly at its mother's side, nursing frequently and learning the complex behaviors necessary for survival. Mother's milk was extraordinarily rich in fat, up to 30% fat content compared to about 4% in human milk, providing the tremendous caloric input necessary for rapid growth in a cold climate. The entire herd participated in calf rearing. Older siblings, aunts, and even unrelated females would help watch over young calves, a behavior known as allomothering. This collective care was crucial, as calves were prime targets for predators. A calf separated from the herd, even briefly, faced almost certain death. The adults would form protective formations around the young, with the largest and most formidable adults positioned on the outside, facing outward toward potential threats. As calves grew, they learned by observation and imitation. They watched older mammoths use their trunks, observed which plants were good to eat and which should be avoided, and learned the geography of their range. Young mammoths engaged in play behavior, mock fighting with peers, practicing trunk skills by picking up sticks and small objects, and testing their developing strength. This play was not mere entertainment, it was education, honing the skills they would need as adults. Weaning typically occurred around age 2 or 3, though calves might continue to occasionally nurse for even longer if their mother did not become pregnant again. By age 5, young mammoths were largely independent in terms of feeding and basic survival skills, though they remained with the herd and continued to benefit from the protection and wisdom of older adults. The long road to maturity. Growth continued throughout a mammoth's life, though it slowed considerably after sexual maturity was reached. Males, in particular, continued to grow larger and develop more massive tusks throughout their prime adult years. By age 25, a bull would be at his physical peak, enormous, powerful, experienced, and formidable. These prime bulls were nearly invulnerable to predators and dominated the breeding competition. However, male mammoths faced a unique behavioral phenomenon known as musth, observed in modern elephants, and likely present in mammoths as well. During musth, which occurred annually and lasted for several weeks to months, a male's testosterone levels would increase dramatically, sometimes up to 60 times normal levels. Bulls in musth became highly aggressive, often dangerous even to their own species, and single-mindedly pursued mating opportunities. They would challenge other males, even larger ones, and sometimes exhibited reckless behavior that put them at increased risk from predators or environmental hazards. Females, meanwhile, developed into experienced herd members. Those who showed particular intelligence, memory, and leadership qualities might eventually become matriarchs themselves, guiding their groups through the challenges of Ice Age life. A matriarch bore enormous responsibility. Her decisions about when to migrate, where to find food and water, and how to respond to threats could mean the difference between survival and death for her entire herd. Migration and movement. Woolly mammoths were likely migratory animals, though the specifics of their movements remain somewhat mysterious. Analysis of isotopes in mammoth tusks has revealed that individuals often traveled hundreds of miles during their lives, suggesting seasonal migrations, similar to those undertaken by modern tundra caribou. These movements would have been driven by the need to follow vegetation, as it became available in different areas across the seasons. Summer migrations likely took mammoths northward and to higher elevations, following the green-up of fresh vegetation. Here, they would feast on the nutritious new growth, building up fat reserves for the coming winter. As autumn approached and temperatures dropped, herds would migrate southward, or to lower elevations, where conditions were somewhat less severe and food remained accessible beneath thinner snow cover. These migrations were not casual wanderings. They followed traditional routes passed down through generations, with matriarchs remembering the paths their own mothers and grandmothers had taken decades earlier. The herds would move at a steady pace, perhaps 10 to 15 miles per day when traveling, stopping to feed along the way but never remaining in one place for too long, especially during the migration seasons. Communication and social bonds. Like modern elephants, woolly mammoths almost certainly communicated through multiple channels. Vocalizations would have included trumpeting calls, rumbles, and possibly infrasonic communications, sounds below the range of human hearing that can travel for miles across open terrain. These low-frequency calls would allow mammoths to maintain contact with herd members over vast distances and coordinate movements across the landscape. Physical communication was equally important. Trunk touches, body postures, ear positions, and even subtle shifts in stance conveyed information between herd members. A mother would caress her calf with her trunk, providing comfort and reassurance. Bulls would engage in trunk wrestling and tusk sparring to establish dominance. Herd members would stand close together, touching frequently, maintaining the social bonds that held the group together. Mammoths also likely possessed sophisticated memories, similar to the legendary memory of modern elephants. They would remember the locations of reliable water sources, the best feeding grounds for each season, the routes to take during migrations, and the faces of other mammoths they had encountered. This cognitive capacity was crucial for survival in an unpredictable environment where conditions could vary dramatically from year to year. The social bonds between mammoths ran deep. When a herd member died, others would show what appeared to be grief responses, touching the body with their trunks, standing vigil, showing reluctance to leave the deceased behind. While we cannot know what mammoths actually felt, these behaviors suggest complex emotional lives and strong attachments between individuals. Ivory, the Ice Age ecosystem. Narrator. To understand the woolly mammoth, we must understand the world they inhabited. A world unlike any that exists today. A landscape that has vanished as completely as the creatures that once roamed it. The mammoth steppe. The environment that supported woolly mammoths and other Ice Age megafauna is often called the mammoth steppe, or tundra steppe. A unique ecosystem that has no modern equivalent. This was not the Arctic tundra we know today, with its dwarf shrubs, lichens, and sparse vegetation, nor was it the boreal forest of evergreen trees that now covers much of the subarctic. Instead, the mammoth steppe was a vast, cold, arid grassland stretching across northern Eurasia and into North America wherever conditions were suitable. This ecosystem was possible because of the Ice Age climate. With so much water locked up in massive ice sheets, sea levels were hundreds of feet lower than today, and the climate was not only colder, but also much drier. The combination of cold temperatures and low precipitation created conditions perfect for hardy grasses and herbs. These plants formed a continuous carpet of vegetation, not lush and green like a temperate prairie, but nutritious enough to support massive populations of large herbivores. The plant community of the mammoth steppe was diverse, including dozens of species of grasses, sedges, flowering herbs, sages, and small woody shrubs. In summer, when temperatures rose above freezing and the sun remained in the sky for 20 hours or more per day, the steppe would briefly bloom with colorful flowers. In winter, the grasses dried, but remained standing, providing food for animals capable of digging through or sweeping away snow. This was a productive ecosystem, supporting a biomass of large animals far exceeding anything found in modern Arctic regions. Studies of fossil deposits and preserved vegetation suggest that the mammoth steppe could support 3 to 4 times as many large herbivores per square mile as modern African savannas, despite the much harsher climate. A cast of giants. Woolly mammoths were not alone on the mammoth steppe. They shared their world with a spectacular array of other megafauna, creating one of the most impressive large animal communities in Earth's history. The woolly rhinoceros, Chelodonta antiquitatis, was perhaps the mammoth's closest ecological counterpart, another massive fur-covered herbivore superbly adapted to the cold, weighing up to 2 tons and featuring 2 formidable horns, the front one sometimes exceeding 3 feet in length. Woolly rhinos were solitary, temperamental, gentle animals. Unlike mammoths, they tended to live alone, or in very small groups, and they were known for their aggressive, unpredictable nature. A woolly rhino's body was covered in thick, woolly fur, similar to that of mammoths, and they used their enormous nasal horn as a snowplow, sweeping away winter snow to reach the grasses beneath. Males would battle ferociously during breeding season, and even predators gave healthy adult woolly rhinos a wide berth. The giant deer, or Irish elk, Megaloceros giganteus, was one of the most spectacular ungulates ever to evolve. Despite its common name, this was actually a species of deer, and males carried the largest antlers of any cervid in history, up to 12 feet wide, weighing 70 pounds or more. These magnificent racks were shed and regrown annually, a tremendous investment of energy and resources. Giant deer stood 6 feet tall at the shoulder and inhabited more temperate regions of Ice Age Europe and Asia, preferring parkland environments with a mix of grassland and scattered trees. The steppe bison, Bison priscus, was the ancestor of modern American bison and European wisent. Larger than either modern descendant, steppe bison stood over 6 feet at the shoulder and featured spectacular horns that swept outward and forward. They were social animals, moving in herds across the grasslands, and their vast numbers made them a crucial prey species for large predators. Cave paintings created by Paleolithic humans frequently depicted these bison, testament to their importance in the Ice Age ecosystem and to human hunters. Cave bears, Ursus spelaeus, were enormous omnivores that inhabited Europe and Western Asia. Despite their fearsome size, males could weigh over 1,500 pounds. Cave bears were primarily herbivorous, feeding on grasses, roots, and berries. Though they would scavenge meat when opportunity presented, they earned their name from their habit of hibernating in deep caves, where thousands of their bones have accumulated over millennia. While not predators of mammoths, cave bears were nonetheless impressive animals that shared the Ice Age landscape, the shadow of teeth and claws. But not all Ice Age megafauna were herbivores. The mammoth steppe supported a guild of formidable predators, and none were more impressive than the great cats. The saber-toothed cat, particularly the genus Smilodon, was an ambush predator par excellence. Though most famous in North America, various saber-toothed species existed throughout the Ice Age world. These cats were powerfully built, with forelimbs much stronger than those of modern big cats, capable of grappling and bringing down prey much larger than themselves. Their elongated canine teeth, sometimes exceeding 7 inches in length, were precision-killing instruments, designed to deliver a devastating bite to the throat or soft tissues of prey, causing rapid death through blood loss or suffocation. The cave lion, Panthera spelaea, deserves special attention, for these magnificent predators were the apex predators of the mammoth steppe, and they played a crucial role in the life and death of woolly mammoths. Cave lions were the largest cats ever to evolve, substantially bigger than any lion alive today. Males could reach over 7 feet in body length, stand 4 feet tall at the shoulder, and weigh up to 700 pounds or more, roughly 50% larger than a modern male African lion. Despite their name, cave lions didn't actually live in caves. They simply left many of their fossils there. Based on skeletal structure, cave lions were built for power rather than sustained speed. Their robust limbs, massive skulls, and powerful jaws made them capable of bringing down the largest prey animals on the steppe. Evidence suggests they may have hunted in social groups, similar to modern lions, though this remains debated among paleontologists. What is certain is that cave lions were supremely efficient killers, and few animals were safe from them. Other predators stalked the mammoth steppe as well. Dire wolves hunted in packs, capable of bringing down large prey through cooperation and endurance. Giant short-faced bears, the largest terrestrial mammalian predators of the Ice Age, used their long legs and massive size to dominate other carnivores and claim kills. Even smaller predators like wolverines and Arctic foxes played their roles, scavenging and hunting smaller prey. This was an ecosystem in balance, but it was a harsh and unforgiving balance. Every animal, from the largest mammoth to the smallest lemming, lived with the constant specter of death, from predators, from the environment, from simple bad luck. It was a world that demanded strength, intelligence, and constant vigilance to survive. Predators and survival, the lion attacks. Narrator. For all their size and strength, woolly mammoths were not invincible. They faced a constant deadly threat from the apex predators of the Ice Age, the cave lions that ruled the mammoth steppe with fang and claw. The lords of the steppe, cave lions, Panthera spelaea, were evolution's answer to a simple question: what does it take to kill a mammoth? The answer was size, strength, intelligence, and courage, qualities cave lions possessed in abundance. These were not merely large cats, they were super predators, animals so formidable that they have no true equivalent in the modern world. Imagine an African lion, already among the most powerful predators on Earth, and then scale it up by 50%. That was a cave lion. A large male would stretch over 11 feet from nose to tail tip, stand 4 feet tall at the shoulder, and weigh 600 to 700 pounds of muscle, fang, and predatory instinct. Their skulls were enormous, heavily built, with powerful jaw muscles capable of generating tremendous bite force. Their canine teeth, while not as elongated as those of saber-toothed cats, were still fearsome weapons, 3 inches long, backed by jaw strength sufficient to crush bone. Evidence suggests that cave lions, like their modern relatives, may have lived in social groups, prides consisting of related females and their offspring, with males holding territories that overlapped multiple female prides. This social structure would have been crucial for hunting the megafauna of the Ice Age. A single lion, no matter how large, could not safely bring down a healthy adult mammoth, but a coordinated pride, working together with practiced efficiency, could accomplish what no individual predator could manage alone. Cave lions were likely most active during twilight hours, dawn and dusk, when their excellent vision gave them an advantage over prey. They would hunt by stealth when possible, using every fold in the terrain, every patch of tall grass, to approach within striking distance, but they were also capable of short bursts of incredible speed, hitting perhaps 35 to 40 miles per hour for brief distances, fast enough to overtake a fleeing calf or to close the gap with a wounded adult and the vulnerable. Not all mammoths faced equal risk from cave lions. Healthy adult mammoths in their prime, animals between 15 and 40 years old, in good physical condition, and surrounded by their herd, were nearly invulnerable. An adult female mammoth weighing 5 tons, armed with massive tusks and a powerful trunk, protected by her herd mates, presented a target too dangerous for even the largest cave lions to tackle with any reasonable chance of success. Adult bulls, even larger and more formidable, were essentially immune to predation. But the Ice Age world was not kind, and not every mammoth enjoyed such advantages. Calves were the most vulnerable. A newborn mammoth, despite weighing 200 pounds, was small enough that a single large cave lion could potentially kill it if caught alone. Young calves up to age 3 or 4 remained at significant risk. They lacked the size and defensive weapons of adults, they were inexperienced, and they were sometimes separated from the herd by curiosity, carelessness, or simple bad luck. For cave lions, a mammoth calf represented an ideal target, large enough to feed a pride for days, but small enough to be overpowered by coordinated predators. Sick or injured mammoths were also highly vulnerable. Disease could weaken even the largest mammoth, reducing its strength and stamina. Injuries, a broken leg from a fall, infected wounds, respiratory illness, could similarly compromise an animal's ability to defend itself. Cave lions, like all apex predators, were experts at identifying weakness. They would watch herds from a distance, looking for individuals that moved differently, that lagged behind, that showed any sign of infirmity. Elderly mammoths faced perhaps the most inevitable risk. As a mammoth aged into its 50s and 60s, its final set of molars would wear down. With failing teeth, the animal could no longer effectively chew its food, and slow starvation would begin. These aged giants would grow progressively weaker, their body condition declining, their ability to keep up with the herd diminishing. Eventually, they would become too weak to defend themselves, and at that point, their fate was sealed. The hunt begins. Narrator. On a late autumn evening, as shadows lengthen across the steppe and the temperature begins its nightly plunge, a drama as old as the Ice Age itself is about to unfold. The mammoth herd feeds on a hillside, 40 individuals of various ages moving slowly through the grass, pulling up mouthfuls of vegetation with their trunks. They appear relaxed, but the adults remain vigilant, ears constantly swiveling, trunks periodically raised to test the wind for sense of danger. In the center of the herd, protected by a ring of larger animals, several calves play and feed under the watchful eyes of their mothers. But one young mammoth, a juvenile male, about 4 years old, has wandered slightly away from the group. Not far, perhaps 50 feet, but enough. He's discovered a patch of particularly tasty sedges, and is focused intently on feeding, his attention completely absorbed by the immediate pleasure of fresh food. His mother, distracted by her new infant, has not noticed his gradual drift away from the herd. The cave lions have noticed. The pride has been shadowing this mammoth herd for 3 days, observing, learning, waiting for exactly this opportunity. The lead lioness, a scarred veteran who has hunted mammoths before, watches the juvenile with predatory focus. She can see his isolation, recognize his vulnerability, sense that this moment might be their chance. With subtle shifts of position and quiet vocalizations too low for the mammoths to hear, she coordinates with the other pride members. The hunt plan, if it could be called that, is simple but effective. 2 lionesses will circle wide, moving downwind to prevent the mammoths from scenting them, positioning themselves between the juvenile and the main herd. The lead lioness and the 2 younger males will wait, hidden in a shallow depression, ready to charge when the juvenile moves into the perfect position. Timing will be everything. They must strike hard, strike fast, and either kill or cripple the young mammoth before the herd can organize a defense. Minutes pass. The juvenile continues feeding, gradually moving further from safety as he pursues the line of tasty plants. 50 feet becomes 70, then 100. The matriarch of the mammoth herd raises her trunk, testing the air. Does she sense something? For a long moment, she stands motionless, alert. The lions freeze, barely breathing. Then the matriarch apparently decides it's nothing and returns to feeding. The trap is set. The strike. The lead lioness makes her decision. With a low growl that signals the attack, she explodes from concealment. The 2 younger males burst forward simultaneously, powerful legs driving them across the ground at tremendous speed. The juvenile mammoth's head snaps up at the sound, trunk raised in alarm, but he has only seconds to react. The lioness covers the distance in heartbeats, her muscular body stretched in full sprint. She targets the juvenile's left hind leg, aiming to hamstring the young mammoth and bring him down. Behind her, the males fan out, ready to seize whatever opening presents itself. The other 2 lionesses, positioned downslope, begin their own charge, cutting off the juvenile's escape route back to the herd. The young mammoth trumpets in terror, a high-pitched scream that instantly alerts every member of his herd. He tries to run, but his legs are shorter than an adult's, his stride less powerful. The lead lioness reaches him first, launching herself through the air in a final leap. 700 pounds of predator slam into the juvenile's hindquarters with devastating force. Her claws sink deep into flesh, finding purchase in muscle and hide. Her jaws clamp down on the back of the mammoth's leg, just above the ankle, and she bites with all her strength. The juvenile staggers, screaming, trying to shake off his attacker. One of the young male lions arrives a split second later, leaping onto the mammoth's other side, claws raking, teeth seeking a grip on the throat or trunk. Narrator, but the lions have made one critical miscalculation. They are not dealing with an isolated, undefended calf. This juvenile has a family, and that family is already responding with the full fury that only threatened mammoths can muster. The defense. The matriarch's reaction is instantaneous. At the first sound of her young herd member's distress call, she wheels toward the threat, her massive head swinging around, trunk raised high. She trumpets, not in fear, but in rage, a sound that reverberates across the steppe like thunder. It is a battle cry, and every adult mammoth in the herd recognizes it. Within seconds, 8 adult females are charging toward the juvenile, moving with a speed that seems impossible for animals of their size. The ground trembles beneath their combined weight. The matriarch leads the charge, her 4-ton body accelerating to nearly 25 miles per hour, tusks lowered like lances. Behind her, the other adults fan out in a coordinated response born of instinct and experience. The juvenile is still struggling, still fighting. The lioness on his hind leg has inflicted a serious wound, but not a crippling one. The young mammoth kicks backward with his free leg, catching the second male lion in the ribs with stunning force. The cat is thrown sideways, the wind knocked from his lungs, temporarily out of the fight. The 2 lionesses who had been cutting off the juvenile's escape route now find themselves facing a far more immediate problem. 8 enraged adult mammoths bearing down on them at full charge. These experienced hunters know when a situation has turned lethal. They break off, sprinting away at angles, seeking to avoid the crushing charge. The lead lioness, still clinging to the juvenile's leg, senses the danger but is committed to her attack. She redoubles her efforts, biting deeper, trying to bring the young mammoth down before the adults arrive. If she can just cripple him, force him to collapse, perhaps there will still be time to kill him before the matriarch arrives like an avalanche. She doesn't slow down, doesn't hesitate, doesn't show the slightest hint of fear, despite the cave lion's size and fangs. She simply lowers her massive head and drives forward with the full momentum of her charge. Her right tusk, worn but still formidable, catches the lioness in the shoulder with a sickening impact. The cat releases her grip on the juvenile and tries to twist away, but she's too slow. The matriarch's tusk tears through muscle and skin, and then the mammoth's skull connects with the predator's body, sending her tumbling across the ground. The lioness rolls, stunned, blood streaming from the gash in her shoulder. She struggles to her feet, favoring her injured leg, and immediately begins retreating. The young male who was kicked has already fled. The other pride members are in full retreat, recognizing that this hunt has failed catastrophically. But the mammoths are not finished. The matriarch pursues the injured lioness for 100 yards, bellowing her fury, ensuring the predator understands the cost of attacking her herd. Two other adult females chase the fleeing males, trumpeting and mock charging to drive them further away. The remaining adults form a defensive circle around the wounded juvenile, trunks extended, tusks lowered, ready to fight to the death if the lions return. They don't. Cave lions are intelligent hunters, and they know when to cut their losses. The pride regroups in the distance, the injured lioness limping badly. They've paid a price for this failed hunt, and they've gained nothing but wounds and bruised pride. They will not target this herd again soon. Aftermath. Narrator. Back at the herd, the juvenile mammoth stands trembling, surrounded by protective adults. His mother has reached him now, and she uses her trunk to gently examine his wounds. The lioness's bite has left deep puncture marks and torn flesh on his hind leg, and he will limp for several weeks. But he will survive. The herd's intervention came swiftly enough that his injuries, while painful and serious, are not life-threatening. The matriarch returns from her pursuit, breathing heavily from her exertion. She approaches the juvenile and touches him gently with her trunk, a gesture of reassurance. The young mammoth leans against her, still shaking from his ordeal. He has learned a vital lesson today: never stray from the herd, not even for the most tempting food. It is a lesson that will likely save his life many times in the years to come. Over the following days, the herd will remain especially vigilant. The adults will take turns standing watch at night, and they will keep the younger members closely guarded. The juvenile's wound will gradually heal, though it will leave a scar that he will carry for the rest of his life, a permanent reminder of the day cave lions came for him, and of the family that saved him. For the lion pride, this failed hunt is a serious setback. The lead lioness's shoulder wound will take weeks to fully heal, and during that time, her hunting effectiveness will be compromised. The pride will need to focus on smaller, safer prey, bison calves perhaps, or juvenile horses. Eventually, they will target mammoths again, because in this harsh environment, predators cannot afford to be too selective about their prey. But next time, they will be more careful, more patient, waiting for a target that is truly isolated and vulnerable. When hunts succeed, narrator, not all mammoth-lion encounters end with the mammoths victorious. In the harsh calculus of the Ice Age, predators must eat to survive, and sometimes the lions win. When conditions align, when a calf wanders too far from the herd in terrain that prevents rapid adult response, when an elderly mammoth finally weakens to the point that it can no longer keep pace with its family, when injury or illness compromises an individual's ability to defend itself, cave lions are capable of bringing down even these massive prey animals. A successful kill on a mammoth represents an enormous windfall for a lion pride. A young mammoth might provide over 1,000 pounds of meat, enough to sustain a pride for a week or more. An adult, though far rarer as prey, could provide several tons of food. In the lean times of Ice Age winters, such kills meant the difference between survival and starvation for predator families. The ecological relationship between mammoths and cave lions was ancient and fundamental. Predators shaped mammoth behavior, keeping herds cohesive and alert, culling the weak and sick, and thereby strengthening the overall population. Mammoths, in turn, influenced lion hunting strategies and social organization. This predator-prey dynamic had played out for hundreds of thousands of years, a deadly dance that neither species could escape. 6. Human interaction and extinction. Narrator. Cave lions were not the only predators that mammoths had to fear. Approximately 50,000 years ago, a new and far more dangerous hunter appeared on the scene: anatomically modern humans, armed with intelligence, tools, and an unprecedented capacity for cooperation. The new apex predator. When humans first encountered woolly mammoths in Eurasia, they found animals that were wary, but not particularly afraid of this upright, relatively small creature. Mammoths had no evolutionary experience with human hunters, no instinctive fear of these strange bipedal apes. That lack of fear would prove fatal for countless mammoths over the millennia to come. Paleolithic humans were sophisticated hunters with complex technologies. They crafted spears with fire-hardened wooden points and, later, sharp stone blades. They developed throwing weapons, atlatls, and later bows that allowed them to wound prey from a distance. Most importantly, they hunted cooperatively, using tactics that involved dozens or even hundreds of individuals working together with careful planning and coordination. Archaeological evidence reveals the ingenious methods humans employed to hunt mammoths. At sites across Europe and Asia, researchers have found the remains of mammoth kill sites, showing clear evidence of human hunting strategies. Some locations show that humans drove mammoths into box canyons or steep ravines where escape was impossible. Others reveal that hunters would separate individuals from herds, then harry them to exhaustion over hours or even days before moving in for the kill. At some sites, such as those in the Czech Republic and Russia, humans appear to have driven mammoths into specially constructed traps, pits dug into the ground and covered with branches and vegetation. A mammoth crashing through such a trap would fall into a pit where hunters waited with spears, attacking the helpless animal from above. Other evidence suggests that humans may have used fire to panic mammoths and drive them in desired directions, or to deliberately stampede herds over cliffs. A complex relationship. The relationship between humans and mammoths was not purely predatory. Mammoths represented far more to Paleolithic peoples than simply a food source, though the meat, fat, and organs from a single mammoth could sustain a human group for weeks. Mammoth ivory became one of the most prized materials in prehistoric culture. The long, curved tusks were carved into tools, weapons, and art objects. At sites across Ice Age Europe, archaeologists have found exquisite ivory carvings, human and animal figurines, decorated tools, beads, and ceremonial objects. The famous Lion Man figurine from Germany, carved approximately 40,000 years ago, was made from mammoth ivory. These objects show that mammoths held spiritual or symbolic significance beyond their practical value. Mammoth bones served as construction materials. In treeless tundra regions where wood was scarce, humans built shelters using mammoth ribs, skulls, and long bones as structural supports, covering them with hides and turf to create dwellings that could withstand harsh winters. Some of these bone houses incorporated the remains of dozens of individual mammoths, representing either the accumulation of many successful hunts or the collection of bones from natural death sites. Mammoth hides provided essential materials for clothing, shelter, and storage containers. A single mammoth hide might cover 20 square feet or more, and, when properly prepared, was both durable and insulating. Fat from mammoths could be rendered for lamp fuel, providing light and warmth during long Arctic nights. Cave paintings and carvings from the Paleolithic era frequently depict woolly mammoths, suggesting these animals held important places in human mythology and culture. The famous cave paintings at Ruffignac in France include over 150 mammoth figures, more than any other animal species. Such elaborate artistic attention implies that mammoths were more than mere prey. They were creatures of profound significance to the humans who shared their world. The beginning of the end, around 15,000 years ago. As the last glacial period began to wane, the world started changing in ways that would prove catastrophic for woolly mammoths and many other Ice Age megafauna. Global temperatures began to rise. The massive ice sheets that had covered much of the northern hemisphere started their slow retreat. Sea levels rose as frozen water returned to the oceans, and critically, the vegetation began to change. The cold, dry mammoth steppe ecosystem that had supported vast herds of large herbivores for hundreds of thousands of years began to shrink and fragment. As temperatures warmed and precipitation increased, the grasslands gave way to different plant communities. In some areas, tundra vegetation, mosses, lichens, and low shrubs replaced the nutritious grasses. In others, forests of birch, pine, and spruce spread northward, covering what had been open steppe. Neither vegetation type could support mammoth populations as effectively as the grassland ecosystem they replaced. The mammoth steppe didn't disappear overnight. The transformation took thousands of years, but for mammoths, the changes were relentless and ultimately impossible to adapt to. Their food sources declined in quality and availability. Their range became increasingly fragmented, with populations isolated from one another by expanding forests, rising seas, and changing landscapes. Smaller, isolated populations faced increased risks from inbreeding, disease, and local catastrophes from which they could not recover. The overkill hypothesis. The role of human hunting in mammoth extinction remains one of paleontology's most contentious debates. The Pleistocene overkill hypothesis, proposed by Paul Martin and others, argues that human hunters were the primary cause of megafaunal extinctions across the globe, including mammoths. Evidence supporting this hypothesis includes the observation that megafaunal extinctions often correlate temporally with the arrival of humans in different regions. In North America, many large mammal species went extinct within a few thousand years of human arrival around 15,000 years ago. Similar patterns occurred in other regions as human populations expanded. Proponents argue that mammoths and other Ice Age megafauna had no evolutionary experience with human hunting and therefore lacked appropriate fear responses. Humans, meanwhile, had sophisticated hunting technologies and social organization that allowed them to kill even the largest animals. Computer models suggest that even relatively low levels of human hunting pressure, killing perhaps 1% of the mammoth population annually, could drive a declining population to extinction within a few centuries. However, the overkill hypothesis has significant criticisms. Many scientists point out that correlation does not prove causation, and that climate change alone could account for much or all of the megafaunal extinction. They note that previous periods of climate change did not cause comparable extinctions, but counter-arguments suggest that this particular warming event was faster and more extreme than previous ones, and occurred while mammoth populations were already stressed by human hunting. The truth lies between. Most modern paleontologists favor a synergistic model where both climate change and human hunting contributed to mammoth extinction, with their combined effects being more devastating than either factor alone would have been. Climate change fragmented and reduced mammoth habitat, creating smaller, isolated populations. These populations were more vulnerable to inbreeding depression, random catastrophes, and local environmental variations. Human hunting, even at relatively modest levels, created additional mortality pressure that already stressed populations could not sustain. The combination proved lethal. In some regions, climate change may have been the dominant factor. In others, human hunting may have delivered the final blow. The relative importance of each factor likely varied by location and time period. The last mammoths. As mammoth populations dwindled across their former range, the species made its last stand in isolated refugia, where conditions remained somewhat favorable. On the Taimyr Peninsula in northern Siberia, mammoths persisted until approximately 10,000 years ago. On St. Paul Island in the Bering Sea, a small population survived until about 5,600 years ago, finally succumbing when rising sea levels shrank their island home and fresh water sources became limited. The very last woolly mammoths lived on Wrangel Island, a remote Arctic island north of Siberia. Here, protected from human hunters by their isolation and sustained by local vegetation, a population of several hundred mammoths survived until approximately 4,000 years ago, around 2000 BCE. These final mammoths lived in a world vastly different from that of their Pleistocene ancestors. In Egypt, the Old Kingdom had already risen and fallen. In Mesopotamia, cities thrived and empires rose. Humans had developed writing, agriculture, and complex civilizations. Yet on this remote island, mammoths still walked the earth. The Wrangel Island mammoths showed signs of the problems afflicting small, isolated populations. Analysis of their DNA reveals reduced genetic diversity, suggesting inbreeding. Some skeletal remains show unusual features that may indicate genetic abnormalities. The population was likely vulnerable to any significant disruption. A few bad winters, a disease outbreak, or simply the accumulated effects of genetic problems. Eventually, something, we may never know exactly what, killed the last individual, and the woolly mammoth was gone forever. 7. Legacy and modern relevance. Narrator: though the last woolly mammoth died 4,000 years ago, these magnificent animals have never truly left us. They persist in our imagination, in our science, and perhaps, in ways we are only beginning to understand, in the very landscape itself. Windows to the past. Woolly mammoths have left behind an extraordinary fossil record, more complete and informative than that of almost any other extinct animal. Thousands of mammoth skeletons have been discovered across their former range, providing detailed information about their anatomy, growth, and population structure. But mammoths have given us something even rarer and more valuable: frozen tissue. In the permanently frozen soils of Siberia and Alaska, dozens of remarkably well-preserved mammoth carcasses have been discovered, some with flesh, hair, and even stomach contents intact. These frozen specimens are scientific treasures beyond measure. The most famous include Lyuba, a month-old female calf discovered in Siberia in 2007, preserved so perfectly that her internal organs remained intact. Scientists studying Lyuba learned details about mammoth physiology, development, and even cause of death. She likely suffocated after inhaling mud while crossing a river. Other frozen mammoths have provided samples of blood, muscle, skin, and organs, allowing researchers to study mammoth biology with a level of detail impossible for most extinct species. Frozen stomach contents have revealed exactly what mammoths ate in their final meals. Analysis shows grasses, sedges, flowering plants, and even stomach bacteria have been preserved, providing insights into Ice Age ecosystems. Pollen grains from mammoth dung reveal seasonal changes in vegetation and help reconstruct ancient climate patterns. Most remarkably, these frozen tissues have yielded DNA. Lots of it. Woolly mammoths have become one of the best-studied extinct species at the genetic level. Scientists have successfully sequenced the complete woolly mammoth genome, allowing detailed comparisons with modern elephants and providing insights into the genetic basis for cold adaptation. The discovery that mammoths possessed a unique form of hemoglobin that functioned efficiently at low temperatures came directly from genetic analysis. The de-extinction debate. This wealth of genetic information has sparked one of modern science's most ambitious and controversial ideas, bringing woolly mammoths back from extinction through genetic engineering. Several research teams are pursuing variations of this goal. The most prominent effort, led by geneticist George Church at Harvard University, aims to modify Asian elephant DNA, mammoths' closest living relatives, by incorporating mammoth genes associated with cold adaptation. The goal is not to recreate a pure woolly mammoth, which may be impossible, but rather to create a cold-adapted elephant hybrid that could survive in Arctic environments and potentially fulfill ecological roles similar to those of mammoths. Proponents argue that such de-extinction efforts could have multiple benefits. Resurrected mammoths could be reintroduced to restored grassland ecosystems in Siberia, where they might help combat climate change by maintaining grasslands that reflect more sunlight than forests, and by trampling snow cover, allowing cold to penetrate deeper into the soil and preserve permafrost. The Pleistocene Park project in northeastern Siberia is already attempting to recreate mammoth steppe ecosystems using modern large herbivores like horses, bison, and musk oxen. Proponents envision adding engineered mammoths to such efforts, creating functioning grassland ecosystems that sequester carbon and slow permafrost thaw. However, the de-extinction concept faces significant ethical, practical, and ecological challenges. Critics question whether resources devoted to creating mammoth-like creatures might be better spent protecting endangered species that still exist. They raise animal welfare concerns about the experimental animals that would be involved in such projects. They question whether resurrected mammoths could truly fill their ancestors' ecological roles in ecosystems that have changed dramatically over the past 10,000 years. There are also profound philosophical questions. Would a genetically engineered hybrid really be a woolly mammoth, or merely an elephant wearing a mammoth costume? Do we have the right to bring back extinct species? And perhaps most importantly, just because we can do something, does that mean we should? These debates will likely continue for years or decades as the science advances. Whatever the ultimate outcome, the mere fact that de-extinction is being seriously discussed reflects the enduring fascination mammoths hold over human imagination. Ecological ghosts. The extinction of woolly mammoths left a profound mark on the ecosystems they once dominated. As megaherbivores, mammoths were ecosystem engineers whose very presence shaped the landscape around them. Mammoths maintained grasslands through their feeding behavior. By consuming enormous quantities of vegetation, they prevented shrubs and trees from taking over, keeping landscapes open. Their dung fertilized the soil and spread seeds across vast distances. Their movements created trails that other animals used, and their digging exposed soil and created microhabitats for smaller species. When mammoths vanished, these ecological roles went unfilled. Many scientists believe this contributed to the transformation of mammoth steppe into modern tundra and boreal forest. Without mammoths and other megafauna constantly disturbing the landscape and maintaining grasslands, trees and shrubs moved in. This vegetation change may have had cascading effects on climate, soil, and the remaining animal communities. Some researchers propose that the absence of mammoths and other megafauna may be contributing to modern climate change. Grasslands reflect more sunlight than forests, creating a cooling effect. Additionally, large herbivores trampling snow in winter helps cold penetrate deeper into soil, preserving permafrost. Without these animals, permafrost is thawing faster, releasing greenhouse gases. While controversial, this mammoth hypothesis suggests that the ecological ghost of extinct megafauna haunts us still. Cultural persistence. Woolly mammoths maintain an extraordinary presence in human culture, perhaps more than any other extinct animal except dinosaurs. They appear in popular media, from Ice Age animated films to countless documentaries. Museums worldwide feature mammoth skeletons as centerpiece displays. Mammoth ivory, thousands of years old, is still harvested from Siberian permafrost and carved into jewelry and art objects. For indigenous peoples in Arctic regions where mammoths once roamed, these animals remain part of cultural memory and traditional knowledge. Some native Siberian peoples have oral traditions about giant beasts that may preserve folk memories of mammoths. The discovery of frozen mammoth remains by indigenous hunters has contributed enormously to scientific knowledge. In our modern era, mammoths have become symbols of vanished worlds, of the fragility of life, of climate change, and of humanity's complicated relationship with nature. They remind us that even the mightiest creatures are not immune to extinction, and that environmental changes can have consequences that reverberate for thousands of years. The lesson of the mammoths. Narrator. As we stand in our modern world, facing challenges of climate change, habitat loss, and species extinction, the story of the woolly mammoth offers both warning and wisdom. Mammoths were superbly adapted to their environment, perfected by millions of years of evolution, dominant across vast territories. Yet when their world changed, when climate shifted and a new predator appeared, their adaptations became insufficient. Size and strength, thick fur and magnificent tusks, complex social structures, and accumulated wisdom, none of it was enough to save them from extinction. But mammoths were also remarkably successful. For 300,000 years, they thrived in one of Earth's harshest environments. They survived multiple climate fluctuations, coexisted with fierce predators, and spread across continents. They were giants that walked the Earth when our own species was just beginning its journey, and they remained until the dawn of recorded history. Today, as we contemplate the possibility of bringing mammoths back from extinction, as we study their remains to understand past climates, as we debate their role in modern ecosystems, these ancient giants continue to teach us. They remind us that species and ecosystems are interconnected in complex ways we are only beginning to understand. They demonstrate that extinction is forever, or at least it was, until modern genetic science began to challenge even that certainty. The mammoths are gone, but they are not forgotten. They live on in the ivory tusks that emerge from melting permafrost, in the DNA sequences stored in laboratory databases, in the museum skeletons that inspire wonder in millions of visitors, and in our collective imagination. They are a bridge between the deep past and the uncertain future, between the Ice Age world and our modern one. And perhaps that is the mammoth's final gift to us, the inspiration to look backward in order to move forward, to learn from the past as we face the future, to remember that we too are part of the great story of life on Earth, and that our actions today will echo through the ages just as the thundering footsteps of mammoths once echoed across the frozen steppe. The Ice Age has ended, the mammoths are gone, but their story continues, written in stone and ice and bone, in DNA and memory and imagination. It is a story of survival and extinction, of adaptation and catastrophe, of the eternal struggle between life and the forces that would extinguish it. It is a story that is not yet finished.